Today we're going to look at three silkscreen shapes made in the late 1930s at Homer Laughlin. Before we get into the shapes, we're going to look at a couple advertisements from trade journals. This first one comes from April of 1936, showing Brittany with this underglaze treatment. And it goes on to say that these are smart monochrome borders applied under the glaze over a flat-rimmed, up-to-date shape, and goes on how the patterns are very affordable and done in pink, green, blue, and ochre. Another trade advertisement from 36 shows even more Brittany treatments. These are all silkscreen. Silkscreen underglaze decorations on the new Brittany shape. Before they were monochromatic. Now we're starting to see some that are two-tone, and we'll look at examples in a moment. And it says again, and now the development and adaptation of the new silkscreen process, the Homer Laughlin China Company offers at popular prices a series of patterns which are unusually attractive, full of sales appeal, and perfect harmony with present-day decorative tendencies. And this is June 36. This is a copy of one from September of 1936 showing plaid treatments on Brittany. Again, silkscreen. They list 4 different color combinations. And here we see the plaids. This is a copy of an advertisement from a Butler Brothers catalog offering the plaids on the Brittany shape. So when we think of 1936, we almost automatically jump to Fiesta. But the silkscreen decorating process was new to Homer Laughlin at the time, and it is something that would be used for many years to come. So let's look at these 3 shapes that were developed specifically for silkscreen. And we're going to begin with Brittany. Brittany was modeled in 1935 and introduced in 1936, the same year as Fiesta. And we've got several different types of decoration here. We've got the monochromatic in this, I guess it's a Lily of the Valley pattern in this dark green. We have the constellation pattern here, also known as North Star. You can find this in several colors. This one's in the red, of course. And then there are two-tone variations. You've got this orange and blue combination on the chop plate in the back. And then you've got the decal and silkscreen combinations, which are rather common on Brittany. And we have an example here with this maroon border that is silkscreen applied. And then it would have been fired, and then it would have come back and gotten decals, gold trim, and this gold stamp on the verge. And then fired again in a decorating kiln. So the combination patterns of silkscreen and decals are, as I said, somewhat common, and you see there's quite a variety. We've got the maroon border, we've got light blue, we've got the sky blue, we've got a cobalt blue. I don't have a pink one out to show you, but there's pink, there's also yellow. And these broken borders, as I call them, because they're not continuous, come in different styles and different shapes. This particular one with this jagged edge on it, I think that's called Lady Alice is the pattern. Majestic is the most common. It was made for Woolworths, and we have a majestic casserole here. And the way to tell this from the others on site, you look at the little edge of this border, and it looks like a W, so that's how I can tell by looking at it that that's the Woolworth pattern majestic. There's a couple other ways you can look at them, like J.J. Newberry's pattern. This was made for J.J. Newberry. These little pieces here look like little J's. So that's J.J. Newberry. So there's little tricks you can do that you can look on site and say, oh, that's Woolworth, or G.C. Murphy in some cases, or J.J. Newberry. The hollowware that was made for Brittany was redesigned early on. The casserole is just a lidded nappy. So it's just a regular nappy bowl with a lid. And you see the original design here with the open finial, and then you see the solid finial that replaced it. And the sugar and creamer underwent similar redesign. Here's the original sugar. This is called Empire, with a blue silkscreen treatment and then gold stamps and gold trim. This is the first version with the open finial and the small bottom, and then the bottom gets enlarged, greater capacity. Let me get the lid off of there. You can see that. And then it has a solid finial. Again, there's the majestic pattern by Woolworths. The sauce boat undergoes a change as well. The original version was a round version with an underplate, and it gets restyled to an oval version. The round sauce boat is probably the most difficult to find of the early version hollowware. So that's a little bit about Brittany. We'll come back to it in a second. The next line that was made for silkscreen was Princeton. This is an interesting shape. There were 8 items made for Princeton. Just some plates, bowls, and the teacup and saucer. There were no hollowware. There was no sugar, creamer, casserole. And the only shapes that you're really going to find, or the only shapes I've ever heard of, are the ones you see here, the 9-inch plate, the teacup, and saucer. Only 3. Reed notes that he made this shape at the request of Woolworths. However, I doubt if it actually went into production for Woolworths, since in general, if there's something made for Woolworths, it was made in great quantity and it's very easy to find. But this is very difficult to find Princeton. And the only patterns found thus far are the ones you see here, this green version and then this red version or pink version. There's also a dark blue one. Now, Princeton has this embossed design with these little daisies, 3 of them on the rim of the plate. And in between the embossing, you have the silkscreen pattern. So this was a very smart way to just make dinnerware real quick. You would just put your silkscreen on it, clear glaze, and you're done. On the teacup, the embossed design's on the bottom. I don't know if that's going to show up too well or not. Both Brittany and Princeton are marked with the General Homer Laughlin back stamp. This one comes from 1937. Princeton was made in March of 1936, although I'm not exactly sure who carried it. There is an advertisement that I show on the website where a wholesaler is selling plates and cups and saucers with this particular pattern, but clearly this did not go into any mass production. It's very difficult to find. It's one of the most difficult Homer Laughlin shapes to find, but it's a fun little shape to have, Princeton. Piccadilly came a little bit later. It was modeled in 1939 and released for production in 1940. It takes all of its flatware from Brittany, but its hollowware, and there's only 5 pieces of hollowware, is a cylindrical form, a little bit different from Brittany. And for the hollowware, there's the teacup, the casserole, the gravy, the sugar, and the creamer. And even though it shares flatware with Brittany, and when I say flatware, I'm talking plates, platters, the saucer, all the sizes of bowls, it does not share any treatments. There's no overlap with the Brittany and Piccadilly treatments. And even though I'm only showing red and pink treatments on this shape, Piccadilly, there are blue ones and there are dark blue ones, so there's other colors. I just happen to pick these out. So let's go back over to Brittany for a moment. One thing about the teapot, there was no teapot in the original assortment for Brittany. So one was created in 1952. So even though these are all Frederick Reed shapes, the teapot we kind of have to footnote and say, well, Don Schreckengost actually made that one based on Reed's design. This one is marked 1954. And it's somewhat unfortunate because a lot of the more deco and interesting patterns were discontinued by the time the teapot came along. So you're not going to find the teapot in too many of the older patterns. You will find a majestic one, but not these earlier ones that we're going to look at real quick. So again, we're going to look at this constellation pattern. It's an early pattern. This is one of the first treatments on Brittany, and it's a two-tone design. I don't think you can see in the video, but this is a very crude attempt. Most of your early Brittany patterns are going to be like that. Here's one of the plaids that we saw in the advertisement. This is the black and yellow. And there's Lily of the Valley. And these later, this is from the 50s, and so these Lily of the Valley in green and maroon, it's a little more refined compared to the early ones. So as time went on, they perfected their silkscreen process. Another thing I want to mention about Brittany, and this is true of Piccadilly as well, if you have something like the Majestic, oh no, this is the J.J. Newberry treatment, you see that it has the underglaze silkscreen pattern in maroon, then it has the decals in the gold trim. Well, when they made these, the silkscreen pattern would have been done first. And if there was a problem with the silkscreen, then it would have been a second or even a third. And they wouldn't have wasted the decals and gold on finishing it out. So what you have, or what you can find, are these unfinished pieces. And you can see this one, the silkscreen didn't quite take on the pattern, on the sauce boat. And so it was left unfinished. Now you can find these unfinished pieces as is, like this, or other potteries would buy them up. And when I say other potteries, I mean like little small decorating firms, and they would put gold, or they would put colonial couple decals and gold stamps and everything else. So that's just a quick note about unfinished pieces. Here we have a majestic cable egg cup that was picked up. We see the underglaze silkscreen pattern combined with the decal and gold trim, and here's one that was unfinished. And you can probably see right there, there's a bad glaze run. So they didn't finish it out. So we have this a blank, if you will. And Brittany is marked the same way as Princeton. It has a plain back stamp. Well, let's see if we can find a good one. I have a plain marking with a date code. Here we go. 1949 on this one. We already saw the Princeton back stamp. Piccadilly has its own special back stamp. Let's find a good one. No. Here we go. 1941 with Piccadilly spelled out. Homer Laughlin, made in USA. And this is an interesting Piccadilly treatment because it has alternating patterns in silkscreen, and I don't know if you can tell, but the gold stamp that's on it alternates as well. That's the only treatment that I know of that has this alternating effect. That treatment number is on the bottom, P529. And here's a little copy of an advertisement from a Sears catalog for oak leaf. And here's the oak leaf cup and saucer. And again, this is Mary Ann. We have the pink diamond underglaze silkscreen treatment combined with decals and gold trim. And here's an unfinished version because it's a factory second. So I guess that's about it for these silkscreen shapes. One last thing I will mention. This shape's sugar bowl is called, well, what's that called? Let me think for a second. Parliament. And it's come from the late 1970s, early 1980s. We'll get to that shape later. But it's a variation of Brittany. You see Brittany with the tall ears on its handles on the side, and then it gets simplified in this version of Parliament. But Brittany makes its way through several different shapes. We'll see it in applique. We'll see it mixed in with other shapes. We see it in hotelware in the form of diplomat. So we will encounter Brittany many, many times as we go on with these videos. So there's your silkscreen group again. Brittany, Princeton, pretty rare shape, and Piccadilly. That's it for today.